My name is Clem, Cecil. I'm the director of Pushkin House. Welcome, if you haven't been here before. And even if you have, please become a friend of Pushkin House to allow us to continue with our programming. Today I'm delighted to welcome Alexey Ginzburg, who I've known for many years. I've known 15 years, maybe something like this. Maybe a bit less, but I've known the house and Natalia Ginzburg. They work together as Ginzburg Design. They've recently opened in London as well. Tonight we're going to talk about Narkomfin, but also Izvestiya building that Alexey recently restored in Moscow, and also touch on some of the wider issues to do with constructivism in Moscow. My background was that I was involved with campaigning for historic buildings in Moscow since 2004, and the building that got me into campaigning for buildings in Moscow was Narkomfin. So this building is incredibly close to my heart. How many of you have actually seen Narkomfin in the flesh? Yeah, okay, so maybe like almost half.
It was another point to show all this on this presentation. Just to remind everybody how it is there.
Okay, so a good few of you have seen it, and so you'll have felt the power of this building. The power of the building that I felt was a sort of gentle power, these incredible proportions that intrigued me, and I looked at it and I thought it was a fragment of a bigger building, which actually it is in a way, because it was never fully realised, the entire project. And I was intrigued by it, and it was when I didn't know really anything about architecture, and it's really through this building that I became interested in buildings and architecture. So I'm very grateful to this building and feel very strongly about it, and have met Alexey over the years at conferences and round tables and with journalists and so on, and watched him very determinedly staying close to this building, which was built by his grandfather, and admired hugely his determination and focus on this building despite the ups and downs that this building has faced. As you know, constructivism is one of the more fragile and vulnerable architectural epochs in Russia. One of the, with the rest of 20th century architecture, the least understood, the least appreciated. And we'll hear a bit about that tonight. I'll pass over to Alexey and Natalia now, and we're going to talk about Narkomfin and also about their publishing project, which is looking again at Alexey's grandfather Moisei Ginzburg's books, who was a great architectural theoretician as well as an architect. And the books haven't been published yet, but tonight we'll hear for the first time in England about this project to publish them in English, which is very exciting ahead of the anniversary year of the revolution next year. So we'll start with the presentation. I'll be guiding Alexey through with some questions, and Natalia, and then we'll open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody who came. We are partners of introduced us to Ginzburg Architects in Moscow and Ginzburg Design Limited in London. Louder?
Yeah, louder.
Okay, I'm sorry. So thank you everybody to come, and I understand that most of you know very well the topic we're talking about. That's why we had some presentation, and I made numerous lectures about this building and the problems concerning Narkomfin and Vanguard legacy in Russia, in Moscow. That was a brilliant idea of Clem to organize it in the way of discussion, questions and answers. That's why I think it shouldn't be boring. I'll try to talk. Still, I have to explain something to those of you who may be not so well informed. I'll try to do it as quick as possible to go to some questions. And anyway, for those who have been there and who have seen Narkomfin House, I would be able to tell some news, because what is making us explain the situation, how it is existing at the moment, that still we have a lot of changes, and we can tell, we can report about some completions, and we can report about some projects approved and about the start of restoration work. So this is not just a simply dramatic story, as always, about the vanguard heritage, half ruined, which and abandoned by everybody. We have some positive notes and positive ideas for tonight.
Can everyone hear? Yeah. Okay.
We started. Let's start from presentation. The Narkomfin house in the center of Moscow, its position near the garden wing, was constructed on the former gardens of historical mansions facing now the garden wing in Moscow. The red line is the border, the limitation of monument of architecture, which was finally in some 2010 or 2012, and if I'm not wrong, was officially approved as the limitation, which is not permitting to do anything within this border. On the right, this is the historical plan, how the complex was existing and was consisting from three blocks: the residential block, the communal block, and the laundry block, which is now belonging to different owners. Here is the site plan, how the situation around Narkomfin is organized. The huge commercial center is on this side. New streets, normally jammed with traffic all day long, are very close to the building. The new complex of American Embassy from behind, and the previous or an existing part of American Embassy from the other side. The garden wing, one of the most, one of the biggest streets in the center of Moscow. The idea of construction underground parking is marked with this pink form here on the side.
And the red building is Narkomfin.
Oh yeah. But I'm not speaking about Narkomfin because everybody knows.
No, they do. Not everybody knows.
Okay.
It's a very thin building.
Okay. Moisei Ginzburg, the author of the architect who is the author of Narkomfin House, one of the leaders of Constructivist group, one of the main groups who worked in 20s, this very short decay of when architecture and art were developed in Soviet Union, in the short period of art freedom, when the new ideas were developed in art, architecture, and in all the branches of art, I would say. And he was not only architect, but also the theoretical leader of this group of constructivists. He was one of two editors of the magazine Modern Architecture, and he was also the author. He wrote 4 books. 3 of them are on this slide. First was Written in Architecture, Style and Epoch, and Dwelling. These 3 books were important as the base of constructivist, theoretical base of constructivist group. Written in Architecture was the first one, and it was consecrated to some new principles of modern architecture and how rhythm was important in organizing this new architecture. The second one, these books were written in 1923 and 1924. So style and epoch more philosophical book was saying about the creation of new style, style which was called international style, and later was became a huge movement which we call modernism, modernist architecture. And all this understanding of new architecture, which was determined by not only by social changes, but also by creation of new society, of new era, was reflection by architects and by Constructivist group by Ginzburg, and was put in this book. Clem was squeezing the experience which was collected by Ginzburg in his work on residential buildings. Narkomfin is the main part of this book, but before Narkomfin there is a huge analysis how they came to ideas of communal house, not house commune, I'll tell later about this, but communal house. How this idea of communal house is which possibilities could people have living in this new sort of building. We are architects and restorers, also are trying to follow some public activity, and part of our activity is the publishing of these books. One of the projects we're involved in. Natalia will tell about this a bit later, but now we'll go further to Narkomfin House. The image very well known, how the building looked like in the project, how it was published in the magazine Modern Architecture.
What year was that?
It was 1928. There was no Milutin's apartment on the top yet. It was without some parts. As always, building when it is the design of the building is slightly different from how it is when it's being built. And this is one of the first photos of early 30s. The southern elevation, southern facade of the building, and the link between the residential block and the communal block. What was also one of the images of early 30s with the straight line balconies and the windows on the eastern facade.
Can you say something about the influence between Ginzburg and Le Corbusier and
we should say about this because this is also part of this not a discussion, but part of reflections. Of course, it is well known that Corbusier was coming to Moscow, and Constructivists, they respected him a lot, and they respected his principles of modern architecture. We know that they wanted very much that he won the competition for Central Soyuz building. They wanted so much that they rejected their own project for this competition. They took off their project to make Le Corbusier's one win. And of course, there's definitely some reflection, some influence of Le Corbusier early works, early villas in this building. But there is also an influence of Ginzburg de Corbusier after the residential projects, after Narkomfin was completed, and other works of Ginzburg were done. And the book was published. We see in Le Corbusier buildings after the war in his Unité d'Habitation. Of course, we see these ideas transformed, but very well seen. Ideas of communal house with the dwelling units, with the public spaces organized in very close very close connection to Narkomfin house and ideas of residential buildings which were done by Ginzburg. So this influencing two architects each other is a very interesting part, and is a very rare part when two talented, two brilliant architects could so positively influence each other in time and in different countries. The structure of the house is maybe most interesting, and what it is famous for. The ground floor, which was empty, with just two stairs, with the lobby entry to the residential part, and the additional stairs, the fireproof entry, and communal walk. The rest of the house was open. The pillars, and the empty space.
The what? The piloti.
The columns, the columns.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, the columns and the empty space, which could join the space in front of the building and behind it. The units, the residential part of the building was consisted of two parts. The first and second floors were on these levels were situated the units of type K, the two levels apartments of 78 meters surface. Quite comfortable, normal apartments. Apartment in two levels could be named normal in Moscow in 1930. But still, these apartments they had kitchen, they had bathroom, they had all necessary supply, because there is a misunderstanding that Narkomfin house was the house where apartments didn't have bathrooms, where was one communal kitchen in the end of the corridor, and people could just stay in their apartments at night for sleeping. Even these small apartments, small units of type F, famous 1.5 level apartments, which organization can be seen on this section. These apartments of type K on first and second levels are here, and the type F on the levels on the level 3, 4, and 5 here. Even these apartments had all necessary equipment, as very small, 37 meters surface, but small but comfortable accommodations for people. That was the idea. This is diagrams of the effectivity of these apartments, because the idea of constructivist group was to find the most effective way to organize the residents, and to make very small, compact but comfortable apartments, units, residential units as they call them, and to organize huge public spaces around these apartments. That's why we call this house communal, not house common, where the lifestyle of people should be changed in terms of social utopia. But rather common for us modern lifestyle. This is what is a very important difference between these two types. There have been several houses common. Maybe some of you know very interesting Nikolaev house common in the on Pushkin Street in Moscow, which is a really example of social utopia, where people should live in small cells where they could just sleep and should use one huge bathroom, one huge canteen, refectory, one space for studying, and so on and so on. Narkomfin was maybe the predecessor of modern residential housing, where the public spaces are arranging the social life of people in a normal way. This is the unit type F, which was divided into two spaces. The living space, 3 meters 75 centimeters high, and small bedroom, 2 meters 30. So they've been divided with the kitchen block, not the kitchen, but just the kitchenette, the small place where the kitchen equipment could be situated, and the small bathroom with the shower. This in one level, and this in 2 levels. There was also another type of apartments, type 2F, etc. There were several types of residential units which were worked out by a group of constructivists. 3 of them have been combined in Narkomfin house. These are the photos how these residential units looked like after the house was constructed. Unfortunately, the industry at that time didn't produce the furniture according to the design of constructivists who were doing very interesting works in terms of industrial design. So we can't see some furniture like in Villa Savoy or somewhere in Germany where this was existing. That's why all the design inside of these apartments is still the old historical furniture and equipment. But it is quite visible how the spaces reach in these apartments, the combination of small and bigger spaces, the fact that each apartment was open to both sides of the house, so it was very well ventilated, very well open to the sun, and in spite of its small dimensions, it seemed much bigger because of this combination of the space and different openings which can be seen here. This is the photo of the corridor, one of the 2 corridors, which were the main communication spaces of the house. In Corbusier buildings, in his residential blocks, these corridors were named streets, Strasse, because these corridors, they've been wider than normal corridors should be. They've been also a part of public space, which was devoted to the people's communication, not simply the place where they should go. They had windows, they were open, one of them was open to the balcony, so it was part of the public territory of the house. Another part of this public territory was flat roof with solarium. These are old photos with the flat roof, but solarium on the upper level of the house was open to all the dwellers, in spite of the fact that this part was the apartment of Minister of Finance Clem, who was the client, who was a very interesting, talented person. The client of Ginzburg, the person who understood the importance of such an experiment and who could understand all the ideas which architects proposed in this building. The communal block, which consisted of 2 spaces with a balcony, with a combination of 2 levels as well. This was canteen, and one of the spaces was in one of the halls was a canteen. Another one was supposed to be a sport hall, but finally it was organized as a kindergarten because kindergarten was not constructed as a separate building in the center of the yard. This structure, communal block, is visible here. So all the functions, the cafe, laundry, the kindergarten, sport, and all these, plus the public spaces where people could meet each other or spend the time in summer in solarium. All this was a very interesting addition to these small units, and was organizing the life. We hardly can imagine now how the life in Moscow or anywhere in Russia was organized in the beginning of the century. The typology of dwelling was very poor. These hostels for workers, which were situated near the factories, and mansions, rich mansions of nobility, and maybe just few. You helped me with the term. Tenement blocks, yes, and very few tenement blocks which began to be constructed just in the end of the 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century. Even in these tenement blocks, when we are trying to investigate them, we understand and we see some ideas of industrial society and some demands of new society, which were worked out later on in Narkomfin. That makes me feel that ideology of this building is the ideology of a modern era, and that is making this building modern for us today. That is why it is showing us not just history of architecture or some utopia, but mostly it can show us some first examples, first attempts to organize the life, how we understand it is normal for us now. Anyway, the interiors of Communal block, this huge glazing was open to the north, to the north, and this small space was not overheated. In fact, these are nice photos showing the very flexible space, which also, in spite of the fact that the house is very small, this Communal block is less than 400 square meters. It seems to be much bigger than 400 meters because of this combination of space. This is the view from the roof, from the terrace on the roof of the Communal block, which was used in the summertime for the cafe to the residential part. Maybe it is not so interesting for tonight's discussion, but still I should tell that that is very important. We're speaking usually about this combination of space, the typology of dwelling units, but this building is very interesting and very important because every smallest part of it was a reflection and was very well done for this special purpose. Technologically, it was on the edge of on the highest edge of construction technology of that time. Even in spite of the economical situation and in spite of the very bad situation with the industry after the Civil War. In spite of all this, the most interesting ideas, some of them have been at the same time worked out while Bauhaus was construction. It was the Bauhaus was construction at the same time in parallel, and also the engineers and architects exchanged with the letters, and the cultural exchange between Germany and Russia at that time was very rich. So these ideas of prefabricated blocks, which were produced on the site, different types, ideas of engineering supply, which was hidden in the walls, a lot of things which also became the base of modern technology of construction, has been first time in Russia, at least first time, has been produced during the construction of this house. Especially the concrete frame, the concrete columns, and very sophisticated structure of the floors. These are photos of the process of construction. Ginzburg on the site discussing something with the workers. This is how the building looked like after it was constructed, it was finished. I'm sure you've seen some of this photo already because many of them are published on the internet, and some of them maybe not. Now, while doing the project of restoration, we looked through most of them more and more, and we found some photos which haven't been published. We were looking for some details which we couldn't find before. And we even found more information, though I was more or less about 30 years trying to do something with this house. Still, even now, this year and last year, we found some details which we didn't know about before in previous attempts. This ground floor with columns and the western facade open to the sun, where all the living rooms of the apartments were looking at. The eastern facade, the eastern sun was for bedrooms, and the living rooms were open to the western facade with the sun, with the day sun. Eastern facade with the with this I'm sure help me please. Цветочницы
with the flower pots.
With the flower.
But it was a trough. It was one continuous trough.
Yes.
For earth.
Yes.
Yeah.
The problem with the troughs made the walls of this eastern facade put the walls of the eastern facade in a terrible condition, which you have seen when you're in Moscow and when you have seen this facade. For a very long time, people said that, you know, that at that time the materials were poor, the technologies were weak, and people didn't know how to construct, and they didn't know how to do with this water damage, this stucco and these poor blocks with this bad with the bad materials which were containing these blocks and so on and so on. After several additional surveys which were done last year and the beginning of this year, we understood that the most of problems became when in some 50s or 60s, I don't know when, people decided to close these holes in these parts, because it was done so that the water, there was no other drainage in them, and the water, additional water, could go out through these holes. And when maybe it was not comfortable for somebody, when they were closed, the water came into the holes between the stucco and the blocks, and that became the life of the eastern facade in a mess. In all the parts where the water couldn't get through this, couldn't get between the stucco and the blocks, the shape, the state of the facade, the state of the wall is, I wouldn't say perfect, but is in a very good state. So even the parts facing north are not so bad. The problem of this house was not the quality of materials, but mostly the bad maintaining, or the absence of this maintaining in some last 70, 80 years. The first 10 years of the life in this house, we used to say that this was kind of a golden age in this house, because people who came to live there were not simply the workers of Ministry of Finance. The translation of Narkomfin is the Ministry of Finance. Many artists, writers, architects, the author of this house, Moisei Ginzburg, was living in this house as well. The Minister of Finance. So this house was the house of intellectual elite at that time. And from 1930 to some 1937, 1939, it was a period when the house was functioning properly how it was supposed to be. In the late 30s, the level of repressions went higher, and has cut this intellectual elite as well as the other parts of the society. And after evacuation during the war, some other people left the house. After the war, new people came who were not interested in these ideas, in the ideas of some communal housing, who were not interested in some new ideas, I would say. Some apartments became communal apartments. Even these small residential units became communal apartments where several, 2 or 3 families had to live in. It is impossible to imagine for you now, I'm sure, but it is like this. And some changes began. First, the ground floor has been built. Something was constructed on the top of communal wall. The voids of 2 levels apartment has been closed. So, piece by piece, the house has been changed. Some photos, maybe you have seen already the house when it was looking like this. The glazing of the communal look, the lower part of the glazing was changed, like in Bauhaus in 30s, was changed to the wall of bricks and ordinary windows. Just the upper part is remaining. The shape of the house became dramatic, and some problems with the engineering supply, some problems with the water, with the maintenance, helped this house to become a ruin slowly, but became a ruin. My father began some attempts to attract officials' attention to this house in the end of 80s, in the period of late Soviet Union. But at that time, when he started some projects with Union of Architects, with some Moscow state organizations, in a few years, Soviet Union stopped its existence, and a lot of new businessmen came who were interested in this plot of land or maybe reconstruction of the building. There were some of them who were interested in restoration of the building, but they couldn't get through the system of getting applications. The house became a mess, and everybody was speaking that it should be restored, it should be safe, but no one could do it. And the attitude of our major former one to constructivist heritage was very well known. Once we did the presentation for him when he came to open the commercial center, which is next to the Narkomfin house, and the owners of this commercial center wanted to show him this presentation when he told, look how nice building you did this. You did on this place, and look this rubbish next to your commercial center. What could be a good idea to demolish this rubbish and to construct another one commercial center on this site? And of course, after this, no one showed him any presentation about the restoration. So it was a lot of I can recall a lot of jokes about this, but his attitude stopped many businessmen who could invest money in restoration of the house because they didn't want to put money in something which is not supported by officials. Anyway, once part of the apartments began to be rented, people who came there began to repair them in their own way. So we lost a lot of original materials, original finishings, which were existing in the house even some 6-7 years ago. I haven't been there maybe for the last 3-4 years before this process of restoration, which is going now. And I was really shocked because as I told the group of English students, I was showing the house. The tutor asked me to show them Narkomfin, and I told them that many years I was showing this house to different architects, and I was telling that I cannot imagine what can happen worse with this house. And this day I can